I actually think I'm getting when I go to a movie and I realize it's either been shot on digital or being projected in digital.
There's been an economic imperative to push digital technology.
Now, why an established filmmaker would shoot on digital, I have no idea.
Why do movies look so dull now? If you ask most people, they'll give you one clean and simple answer. Digital cameras have been the scapegoat for all problems with modern cinematography. Of course, there is a hint of truth to this. Whereas movies shot on film have rich texture, high contrast, and more vibrant colours, many blockbuster films shot on digital look like this. So case closed, right? I can show you two movies side by side and say one looks better than the other because it was shot on film. But wait a minute. Despite the clean look and heavy use of CGI, Rise of Skywalker was actually shot on 35mm film. You might think the holdovers used an older 70s film stock for their camera. However, this movie was instead shot entirely on digital. The expert color grading just tricks you into thinking it isn't. For good visuals, it turns out that the type of camera you use isn't as important as what you do with it. Sure, film has given us gorgeous shots like this, but digital has also given us this, and even this. Now, I have to admit that I personally prefer the look of film. Its grainy texture and high contrast produce an aesthetic I love and associate with auteur cinema. That being said, I still think digital filmmaking has way more potential than anyone gives it credit for. In this video, I'm going to cover some of my favourite examples to prove its merits. But before I can share some of these, I'm sure you're wondering, what's the difference anyways? Let's say you want to shoot a movie. How would you go about this? Well, one way, and indeed the only way, would be to take lots of pictures in quick succession and play them back in order, a moving image. Whereas traditional cameras capture light and physically print it on a film stock to be developed, digital cameras are entirely electronic and encode the light onto a file. Without getting too technical, film is made up of dyes and digital is made up of pixels. Both have their pros and cons in relation to cost and convenience, however, that's not what we're here to talk about today. As a wise man once said, show, don't tell. Let's explore some films with gorgeous digital cinematography and why their directors chose to shoot this way. I'd also like to hear from you, so tell me your favourite film shot on digital down in the comments below. Don't forget to double check that you're subscribed while you're there too. Wait, I said gorgeous, right? Then why is my first example a movie that was shot on a digital camcorder in 2002? The resolution is only 480p, which is 36 times less than the typical 4K we expect now. Well, the first point I want to highlight is that digital cameras can be a stylistic choice. Yes, the resolution of 28 Days Later is extremely outdated and looks awful in comparison to film at the time, but that's the intention. By using a Canon XL1, Danny Boyle and his crew were able to save costs, maneuver it easily, and give the overall movie a found footage feel. For an apocalyptic zombie flick set in the early 2000s, this decision makes perfect sense. Sure, the images might not be the highest quality, but cinematography doesn't have to be crisp all the time. You can also evoke emotion. Besides, you wouldn't be able to get a shot as cool as this one on a traditional film camera alone. Found footage horror such as the Blair Witch Project and Cloverfield have also used camcorders to generate a feeling of unease. Of course, this isn't their only stylistic purpose. Movies set in the late 90s and early 2000s can use older models of digital cameras for historical accuracy and to evoke feelings of nostalgia. Aftersun was mostly shot on 35mm film, but also contains plenty of footage recorded by Frankie Corio on a mini DV, and it's essential to the story. This film revolves around adult Sophie looking back on her childhood memories to understand her dad better. Given technology always continues to evolve, what better way to capture the past than to use what was there at the time? Anyways, you probably clicked on this video expecting me to talk about movies that actually look good. Don't get me wrong, these examples are great for their stories and emotions, but they aren't winning any awards for their visuals. Let's instead turn our attention to one of the greatest digital cinematographers of all time, Roger Deakins.
I like digital. It just gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of things that you can do that you can't do with film.
You might not know him by name, but I guarantee you know his work. The Shawshank Redemption, Fargo, No Country for Old Men, all shot on film and gorgeous in their own right. However, in 2011, something changed.
The first film I did digitally was In Time, and we made the decision to shoot that digitally because of the kind of film it was. We were only going to use it for part of the film, and then we just thought, I don't see any difference. And I just thought at that point the time had come to start shooting digitally.
And so he did. Collaborating regularly with Denis Villeneuve, Roger Deakins shot the movies Prisoners, Sicario, and Blade Runner 2049 all on digital cameras. In fact, the latter won an Oscar for Best Cinematography in 2017, and it's not hard to see why. This film is breathtaking, with its neon lights, desolate wastelands, and brutalist structures. The extensive use of CGI already makes digital cameras an appropriate choice, which I'll talk about soon. Despite this, the crew deliberately captured as much footage as possible with on-set lighting. This is the real secret as to why Blade Runner 2049 looks so good relative to other digital blockbusters out there. Franchise films have become notorious for studio interference and reshoots, which is extremely costly due to the number of special effects. To allow for flexibility in post, green screen footage will often use flat, basic lighting. While not committing to any one style means changes are easier to make, it leads to a boring, greyish image, what many have dubbed the Netflix look. Streaming services are another partial reason for this, as the lower contrast makes it much easier to watch on home TVs and monitors. Of course, Denis Villeneuve had the cinematic experience in mind when directing Blade Runner 2049. By committing to a specific visual style and using on-set lighting and backgrounds where possible, the final cut avoids looking like other generic blockbusters. I'm sure most people can agree, but I'd rather watch a movie that takes risks and tries something new instead of looking exactly the same as everything else. Deakins also landed another cinematography win for shooting 1917 digitally, and again, it's not hard to see why. Yes, the film appears as 2 continuous takes, which is great from a technical standpoint, but I'm even more impressed by how good it looks regardless. This is another area where digital thrives, in its maneuverability. Traditional 35 and 65mm film cameras are heavy and larger in size due to capturing the light onto a physical film stock. Obviously, the crew didn't shoot the entire thing in one take, instead splicing sections together to make it appear as such. Even so, when most of your shots are around 5 to 10 minutes long with up to 500 extras and require lots of movement in small spaces, shooting on film is completely out of the question. Digital also has the advantage of instantly displaying the recorded footage on a monitor, as opposed to film stock, which takes time to be developed. This means director Sam Mendes could actually do his job and make changes to the set, blocking, lighting, and actors' performances in real time. 1917 is far from the only film to achieve this unbroken take effect. Birdman did it back in 2014 by also using the same Arri Alexa system of digital cameras. In fact, the movie Boiling Point was shot entirely in one take, with no cuts or splices to mask the theatrics. Alfred Hitchcock tried his best to do this in Rope, however, old film cameras could only record up to 10 minutes at once due to limited film reel sizes. Thanks to the advent of digital cameras, an entire feature-length film can appear to be, or even actually be shot continuously from start to finish. I do think this gimmick is overdone at times, but it can definitely work for immersion in high anxiety situations. Earlier I mentioned that digital is a lot better for shooting movies with a lot of green screen, but why is that? Without getting too scientific, digital cameras are a lot more sensitive to green light, and hence chroma keying is much cleaner in post-production. As much as I love Total Recall, the movie did a terrible job at this due to technological limitations at the time. You'll want to avoid these glowing edges and have lighting that blends in with the CGI background wherever possible. For those who don't know, chroma keying is when you remove a specific range of colors from your image to layer it on top of others. I'm doing it right now with my green screen, see? This might be ridiculous, but one of my favorite examples of this is Speed Racer. Now, I understand this film looks like it was made by a 10-year-old, but I genuinely love it. When adapting this manga and anime series into live action, the Wachowskis took a radical approach to the visual style. As Lana put it, we are going to assault every single modern aesthetic with this film. I could talk at length about their inspirations, but the biggest choice was to use digital cameras on as much green screen as humanly possible. This is obvious from the racing sequences, however, it's just about everywhere in the film. Take a look at this shot. It feels a little off, right? That's because everything is in focus, and I mean everything. We are not used to watching movies this way because cinema cameras cannot physically do this. In fact, focus is often something you want in your picture. By keeping the subject clear and the background blurred, or vice versa, it draws the audience's attention to the place you want them to look at. Speed Racer is not like other films, however. Drawing inspirations from manga panels and anime, the Wachowskis wanted an infinite depth of field for their picture. By filming the foreground, midground, and background elements separately, then combining them together, it achieves this effect that looks unlike anything else. While they didn't end up committing to an infinite depth of field for every scene, the ability to use different lenses for each layer of the image was immensely powerful and produced some of the most insane visuals I've ever seen in a film. Another example of the technique is this shot near the start of Eddington, which has the entire town in focus. Such creative use of green screen would be much harder, if not impossible, to do on traditional film cameras, which are often forced to use blue screen due to the physical properties of film stock. Speaking of blue screen, take a look at this scene from Park Chan-wook's Decision to Leave. This has to be one of my favorite uses of the mirror technique, where two cameras are used to film the same shot at different angles, then composited together. Notice how in the foreground, So-rae is in focus, but in the reflection, it's Hae-jung in focus instead. As the scene progresses, this switches to draw attention to the character speaking while also visually communicating their feelings towards one another. Decision to Leave was shot digitally and has such creative ways of capturing modern technology. A gorgeous film which I highly recommend for anyone interested in Korean cinema. The last advantage of digital cameras I want to mention is a term you may have heard before: high dynamic range, or HDR for short. In dark settings, traditional film cameras struggle to capture crisp images, requiring higher film speeds and bright lights for much needed exposure. This is why past cinematographers would often shoot day for night, or use blue lighting to represent the moon's reflection. Thanks to consistent improvements to the dynamic range of digital cameras, however, they are able to capture scenes with a wide range of colors in low light environments. Unfortunately, this has led to a trend of lazy filmmaking. Plenty of movies now are severely underlit, requiring an increase to exposure in post and hence that grey Netflix look we've talked about. When HDR is used effectively, however, you get the beautiful imagery of Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive. Given this is a neo-noir set in LA, much of the movie takes place at night in a cityscape. Cinematographer Newton Thomas Sigel took advantage of the Arri Alexa's dynamic range to capture high contrast images in low-key lighting while still maintaining vivid colours. This is most obvious in the opening credits, where light sources mainly come from the surrounding urban environment. Here you can see Ryan Gosling's face in perfect view when driving past a street lamp, which would be almost impossible to achieve on a film camera alone. This is especially crazy when you compare it to Collateral, another neo-noir set in LA that came out 7 years prior. As much as I love the digital cinematography in that film too, just look at the difference in resolution and noise. The dynamic range of these newer camera models only continues to increase, and my hope is that future directors will use this power with great care. There are way more examples I could mention, such as Mad Max Fury Road, Her, Moonlight, and Arrival. These were all shot on digital, and I've talked at length about the advantages it has over film. But is one truly better than the other? Well, of course not. My intention with this video isn't to state that digital cameras are superior in every way and must be used for every movie. Likewise, it's not my intention to romanticize film and state that it always looks better. I think Roger Deakins says it best.
It's not about the bloody technology, it's about the person behind it.
At the end of the day, the camera you use is just a tool. You pick the right one for the job and you use whatever you're most comfortable with. Even then, the choice to shoot on digital or film is just one of infinitely many. Camera placement, lenses, aperture, framing, blocking, lighting, set design, rendering, color grading, and special effects all contribute to the composition of a shot. So what's the lesson here then? I wanted to make this video to dispel the myth that digital cameras are the reason for bad visuals in modern blockbusters. It's not the tool that's caused this, but how it's been used. Some of my favourite movies of the decade were shot on film, such as Oppenheimer, I Saw the TV Glow, Sinners, and The Brutalist. On the flip side, some of my favourites were also shot digitally, such as Nickel Boys, 28 Years Later, and all of Greg Fraser's work. As an aside, both Dune movies and The Batman were shot on digital cameras, but transferred onto film stock and scanned back for an extra layer of texture. Just want to point this out before I get comments about it. Even then, this is just proof that cinematographers should use the medium they prefer most. I'm not going to state that the camera type doesn't matter, because in some aspects it does. Instead, the real takeaway is that creators should shoot on whatever they think works best for the film they're making. Going forward, it's clear that the industry is pushing to make things entirely digital. I still hope film cameras stick around for the love of the craft, but let's also not be afraid of change. Digital filmmaking shouldn't be forced onto every director, but it is here to stay whether Quentin Tarantino likes it or not. The least we can do is learn from the examples I've given, explore its full potential, and just make some good f***ing movies while we're at it. Obviously you enjoyed the video since you've made it this far, so don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe for more.